No coffee cup?
So do you
Just
not
straight water
hear
bottle?
when I'm? You know that I took off. Now that I took off that mute button, the aggravating one.
Yeah.
Do you not hear me in your ears when it's on, like you did then?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
You just enjoy it now.
It's lovely
Yeah.
to hear you sing.
Big difference.
Oh, come let us adore. It's like a low drone.
You know, we were at Fox Theater. Tommy used to do this thing every year. He quit. It was a bad decision. He should have kept doing it.
Why'd he quit?
Well, Christmas.
Like
it was
quit working here?
Christmas with the Gettys.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They were doing that at Fox. Maybe they still do, but at least they did for a handful of years, and we would go every year. And then one year, Tommy's like, I'm not going to do it this year. We'll just do something different. But I don't think he actually replaced it with anything.
They're quite Irish.
Well, they did. It was a really fun show, and it would be, 50, 60 of us. And this one time, I don't know, one of the two Gettys, Keith or Kristen, got to the front and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sing this song. And some Christmas song everybody knew. And they were like, okay, now we're going to teach you how to be a choir. They were just having fun with the crowd. They're like, okay.
I've seen this bit.
Do you know if you're
yeah.
a soprano or whatever? Well, then it's like, okay, now basses. Let me hear the basses. Basses, you're going to sing whatever it was.
They give you a note, yeah.
And all the guys started singing. And then they were like, hang on. Every guy wants to think he's a bass. Pretty much every guy is not a bass.
Right.
And they were like, some of you are hearing the guy behind you or next to you sing, and you're thinking you're not a bass. You're not a bass. Turn to him and say you're not a bass. Of course, no one turned to me and said that. Mm-hmm. So it made everyone laugh. Everybody got a kick out of it, and then it kind of thinned out the basses. Well, then what happened is, I said, okay, now do it just guys who are actually basses. And man, the whole room went low. It was crazy. I guess Fox Theater's kind of got a shape for it anyway, but
that's a great room.
It sounded awesome. Yeah.
My first Dove Awards that we were nominated for, they used to hold it at the Fox Theater.
Where is it now?
It's in Nashville at the Lipscomb. It's at their arena.
I wonder why they changed it.
Well, because everybody lives in Nashville. Nobody lives in Atlanta.
All the music professionals.
And I think the Gospel Music Association kind of had a deal with the Fox Theater to be able to get it. But it was a nightmare, man. We tried to pull our 45-foot tour bus downtown. It's right there by the Varsity. It's
terrible right there. Yeah, it's a very good place.
But it is a great theater.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's good to go see shows there. We've seen a number of things there.
That was the first of 4 Dove Awards that I lost.
Man, you keep your track record then.
I'm 0 for 4.
Mm-hmm. 0 for.
It's sad, really.
What were the nominations for?
Best New Artist, that was one. Contemporary Song of the Year was one. Inspirational Album of the Year, that was my solo one. And then Gospel Recorded Song of the Year.
How does a person get nominated for that?
I think, so you have to release an album or a work, because they do video stuff too, within a period of time, in a year. But it's weird. It's like a fiscal year, So you have to, and then it gets submitted. So your record company, or if you're an independent artist, you can submit it for, what's the word I'm looking for? Not approval, submit it for consideration. There you go.
Okay.
And so you do that. That's a process. And then the Gospel Music Association, easy for you to say, you have members. And if you're a certain level of a member, like I'm an artist, but I'm also a professional member. So I get to vote. And so that consideration, they have a committee, like every good Baptist organization does, and they whittle it down, and then they present it to the members to vote, and then you vote. It goes from like 20 to 10 to then the 5. So you have 3 rounds of voting.
Like 20
submissions in a particular category.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
so you just keep narrowing it down.
Yeah, and I think as creativity has widened, and I think popular music has kind of navigated into a particular space. Like there used to be no worship category because the worship genre didn't exist. Well, now it's pretty prevalent.
And now
if you turn on K-Love, that's all you hear.
And everybody's writing music now. Every church, there's groups. I have a buddy I went to Bible college with that he's with a group. He was a worship leader for years. Maybe he still is for all I know, but he was in North Carolina, then Texas. I don't know where he is now, but you can hire his team, and he's seriously gifted. and they'll come work with your team like for a week or 2 weeks or whatever at your church to start working on coming up with original
cool.
works. It's pretty neat what he does.
I've been a part of a couple of those like songwriting intensives. They're good. They're good. I think my songwriting is more in the vein of, from an artist perspective. And I've done some stuff like at churches I've served. I've written some stuff for that. But it's hard, man, because you're writing for a particular group of people, your church, in a season that your church is in. Like, the one I did in Texas, we'd had a 150th anniversary. And so I wrote a song about, God's faithfulness to the church, that particular group of people, and he used very direct references. Or we went through a season where our pastor did a summer series on the book of Psalms. And so he would pick all these Psalms out and want me to write songs for each individual one, and then I would do it that Sunday. Well, like one of them was okay, but we had 10 weeks of those. Like I had 9 bad songs.
Yeah, you start running out of ideas.
Yeah, and so it's, at some point, depending on what psalm you're in, David's either really happy or really sad, and so it just leads to a lot of manic songs.
True.
But
I remember back in the 90s, you remember that group Pearl Jam?
Oh, yeah.
They were huge, man. And
I was a fan.
I remember reading about how they came together, and if I'm not mistaken, it was like the band existed without the lead singer, Eddie Vedder, but then the lead singer was a poet.
Yeah.
And they were musicians. And so somehow they just sort of brought his poetry that he'd had and came together. And so that first album, broke all these records and everything sold out. I mean, they'd have those things where Ticketmaster, call this number, and then the concert would sell out in 43 seconds or something. This is back before everybody was online. But what followed was the rest of the songs, the rest of the albums, they were okay. But like first album, all the songs became hit singles. So it makes me feel like if you, I would imagine, what do I know? But I would imagine that if you get an artist that just at their pace, at their time, as the creative idea comes to them, they can put out a great song. But if you were to say, I need you to give me 10 songs tomorrow. Yep. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to vouch for any of these.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head for, I think, the tension in the music industry. And as somebody like me who's more of an inspired songwriter, like I get inspired by circumstances or inspired by, stuff that people I know are going through or whatever. Like I wrote a song about, a child that we lost, or wrote a song about, just really trying to figure life out. And all these things happen in a very concentrated amount of time. So that writing was just overflow. Well, the psalm, the series of psalms where I was tasked with writing something, that was a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But the tension of that is you have these artists who write, and then you have these songwriters who are artists. And there's a vast difference. I think in preaching world, you would have like pastors who are evangelists, and then evangelists who are pastors. So somebody who's in a church week in and week out, who is also evangelistic in their approach and their how they bring a message back, or an evangelist who can be a pastor, who has a pastor's heart. Does that make sense? And I got plenty of friends who live in Nashville and are writing songs for a living, and I could name several of them off to you, and they're, one of them's been on the top of the iTunes single chart. It's a Lauren Daigle song. The guy who wrote his name's Michael Farron. It's been there for like 8 years.
Wow.
So it's, now there's no money in it.
But there's no money in what?
In songwriting.
Really?
The royalty system's all screwed up.
So if you write the song.
I think my last royalty check was like 64 cents. It cost them more to send me the check.
Yeah. How do they figure that?
There's percentages, and part of it's regulated by the government too, which is why like Amazon, Spotify, they're the worst.
Oh, yeah.
They're the worst. They don't pay anything. And everything's streaming now. Back in the day when you sold records, you could make money, because you're selling a physical product, and the payment was a lot better. But now because of streaming, because of access, they whittled that number down to 0.0009 cents per stream.
Goodness.
And you got to split that if you wrote the song with multiple people. So there are particular pastors in Charlotte who tend to write a lot of songs. Well, they get a third for a word. You know what I'm saying? So if it's his idea and they write a song about it,
he gets cut.
Of course he does. So anyway, I digress.
Don't get me started on that whole direction.
Cup of the day. I moved away from my Christmas mugs. This is the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, North Carolina. Shelby's dad was part of the 82nd. So shout out to Rick Oliveras. Thank you for your service. My brother is in the 82nd. So he's stationed at Fort Liberty now.
Very cool.
Because we took all the names away if they've offended somebody at any point. Just thank you for your service to those of you who have served.
Indeed.
This mug is about 20 pounds and 30 years old.
I was about to say, is it old? It looks old.
It's old, yeah. 82nd Airborne.
Looks a little faded. It's been through the ringer.
Yeah, it has. Been through the dishwasher.
The dish ringer.
Get it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it, Kellan. I get it, and it was funny. Did you see my face? This is me saying that was funny.
You're going to laugh. You're going to laugh. All right, Isaiah 53.
Indeed.
We're back at it. I did bring a prop today that I'll share about a little bit later, but for now, we'll just enjoy a nice little conversation by
Dude,
candlelight.
it's good to have that thing. It is freezing in here.
Well, you're wearing short sleeves.
Well,
it's cold
with a
out.
Jacket. I'm not going outside, but you would
You're
think
not taking care of yourself.
the heater could be on in the building. I mean,
Your mother would have a stroke if she saw you wearing short sleeves.
Somebody would be like, "What is wrong with you, boy?
That's why you can't
Put a sweater on." I know.
That's why you're getting sickly.
That's why.
You're getting sickly. That's what my grandmother used to say. You're sickly.
Well,
So if you wind up sick for Christmas Eve services,
I'll just bring this closer to me.
yeah, it's the Fraser fir scent.
Yeah.
So hopefully it smells like a Christmas tree.
It's like a Tiny Tim fire.
God bless us, everyone.
Yeah.
All right, Isaiah 53. We are, we are pushing toward the end. We got one more week of this Advent series.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I love what you've been doing, man. You start off your sermon by reading the entire chapter, and I think that provides a lot of context for folks who may jump in one week or not the next. But you've been really focusing these verses to go along with the theme of the particular week of Advent. And this week was joy. We lit the pink joy candle. I told the people who are lighting it, I said, "You really can't screw this up. Like it's the only candle that doesn't like the others." So please don't screw this up.
Every time I see a group who's about to light the candle, I walk over with a big smile and say, "Don't mess us up."
Are you so nervous?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you have one job.
You have
and
one
it's all
job up
dependent
there.
on
Don't
you.
go up there and knock over the table. Set the stage on
Well,
fire.
you and your family have one job on Christmas Eve. It's the white candle in the middle.
The big one.
So you can't, you literally can't screw that.
Christmas Eve is the big Christ candle.
Yeah. Are you going to let Jackson light it this year?
I don't know if I want him with a flame in his hand, with some kind of ignitable fluid.
Oh, that's funny. All right. So we're digging into verse 6, 7.
Nope, 7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9. Okay. 6 was last week. All our like sheep are going astray. But you referenced the sheep again this week.
I did because Isaiah did.
And that was one of my big takeaways. Verse 7, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Let's just start there.
Man, it's all about silence. That first verse, Isaiah's really focusing on the silence of it. So, and when you go back and look at it with the context of Jesus and the trial, that was it. He never refuted, rebutted, he answered a question, once or twice, but he didn't deny or anything like that. There was that one interaction where the guy was like, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "You're right in saying that I am. You said it." But yes, silent before the shearers is how Isaiah put it. So clearly getting the image of a sheep, which is good. And that's a really cool thing. I was talking to somebody last week, and they're starting to see through their own private personal Bible study, and then they're having a family scripture reading time, and then they're seeing what we're doing on Sunday mornings and how much it comes together. And it happens all the time. Almost every week, someone will come to me and say, "Oh my goodness, in Sunday school, we were studying this, and it perfectly goes along with what you were saying." And the funny thing is, almost every time, what I said and what they studied really weren't connected, but because it's all God's word, there is a way in which it
Living,
connects.
active, sharpened to edge.
Yeah, and that's when people start to really see that, and you see that thread that runs really, it's called the red thread of the gospel that runs from Genesis to Revelation. It's really cool. And Hebrews connects with Leviticus and connects with Isaiah and connects with Matthew, and it all comes together.
Well, it's almost if you're reading this passage, you can put your mind in what you read in, Matthew's gospel, in Luke's gospel, and John, of Jesus' last week on earth, really, and how all of these things you see really come to light, where Jesus rides in on the donkey, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he's come in the name of the Lord, and then boom, he's despised and rejected. Acquainted with grief. I love that phrase. I think it was verse 2 or 3, where Isaiah said that, 3, he was despised and forsaken, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And just this real picture of Jesus facing his last week on earth, and yet here's Isaiah some 700 years before prophesying all of these things that would come true. And yet I still can't understand how this has no relevance in the traditional Orthodox Jewish faith.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they go out of their way to avoid it. They almost get mad if you bring it up, even though it's in their own writing, and I've seen it. I've seen it a number of times. Well, most of the time when I've brought it up to someone who is Jewish and I'll ask them about Isaiah 53, they've never, I don't even know, maybe once a Jew has said, oh yeah, no, I know Isaiah 53, but they can't relate it to or say it's about Jesus. They can't because, if they're Jewish and they don't believe in Christ, then they're still looking for the Messiah. So they might be able to say that Isaiah is about the future coming Messiah, just it wasn't Jesus. I guess they could say that. But
yeah, so in your conversations with your Jewish friends or the Jewish people that you've encountered, like how do they, I think in my mind, because it's so filtered through a Western Christianity mindset, how in the world can you reckon that? Like, let's take a Jewish person living in the United States who is surrounded by cultural Christianity, church. I mean, undoubtedly they've had some sort of interaction with people of faith of some sort. Maybe not a pastor, maybe not a theologian, but of faith. And yet everything hinges on Jesus coming as a baby, living a sinless life, dying on a cross, raising from the dead 3 days later, and his soon return. And yet, how can you hold on to this belief as a Jew? I don't know if you've had those type of conversations, like when it seems so glaring. Yeah,
well, it does seem so glaringly obvious to me, when I read the passage and see that it connects immediately with Jesus. But, one very well-known Jewish person that a lot of people who are listening to this podcast may be familiar with, the guy named Ben Shapiro, political commentator. And
fastest talker in the world.
And he's serious about his faith. I mean, he wears his yarmulke. He is a practicing devout Jew. But he has very strong opinions about who Jesus was. In fact, he was asked, I might have been on the Joe Rogan podcast, okay, you're Jewish, who do you think Jesus was? Immediately he gave an answer. And you say he's a fast talker. He gave an answer as quick as he ever has on any other subject. And he said he was a tyrant. He was a guy who raised up against the government. He was just like a rabble rouser, a troublemaker, and no different than a number of other people who rose up trying to gain fame and become this, lead a coup against the government, and they killed him for it. Move on. Nothing else to talk about. I mean, Shapiro was very direct, very unkind, and if you were a Christian, a little offensive, what he had to say. But hey, listen, at least he's consistent with the Jewish position, right? And I'm talking about the Jewish religion, And that's where a lot of people often get twisted up is you have these, words that have more than one meaning, like a double entendre. I mean, some people, when they say Jewish, they just mean everybody living in Israel.
Sure.
But that would be the case if you've never been to Israel. And most of the people living in Israel, they're not all Jewish.
Right.
They might be Israeli citizen, which is not the same as Jewish. And then you've got, there's Christians living in Israel. There are Muslims living in Israel. There are Armenians and Orthodox. There are atheists. Yep. Israel is like many other countries that have multiple different faiths. So Judaism is not synonymous with Israeli, And in fact, the group that went with my wife and I to Israel back a few months ago, before all this happened with the Palestinian terrorism, our guide was a Christian Palestinian Israeli citizen who's born and raised in Jerusalem. His family dates back in Jerusalem 800 years.
Sounds confused.
Yeah. His family dates back 8 centuries in Jerusalem.
Good grief.
And his family dates back Christian 8 generations.
Okay.
So his family has been Christian. So he's fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. That's why he was such a phenomenal guide for us.
A true historian.
Oh, and in fact, he's a member of the Archaeological Society in Israel. And man, he and I have had phenomenal conversations about what goes on in Israel, and still, even while this is going on, the war over there now. But my point is, he's a Christian, Palestinian Christian, who's a Israeli citizen.
So this brings up all. I mean, we don't plan what we're going to talk about. Well, I mean, we plan to talk about the sermon, but who knows where it goes. So this brings some questions to my mind. In light of what you just said, Shapiro's response about who Jesus is, how foreign of a concept that is for me as, a church-going good old boy from the South. When maybe because of the contextual Christianity and cultural Christianity that I've lived in for so long, I've never encountered somebody like that.
Which part? Someone
like somebody like Ben Shapiro, who could have such a hardline belief that Jesus was the antithesis of everything I see that he is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had people reject Christ, in conversations I've had, but they understand Christianity, because they grew up around me or they understand. And I mean, I'm putting mission work in a completely different category. I'm just talking about everyday life. And so if we are to live our lives on mission for the gospel, if we're to live our lives looking for divine appointments and divine conversations, how can we as followers of Christ be informed when someone takes a position like that? That's very hard-nosed, hard-lined, honestly offensive. How do we share compassion? I mean, and I'm going to loop it back into this verse that is like a sheep that's led to or like a lamb that's led to the slaughter, and the sheep was silent before its shears. He did not open his mouth. And so how do we keep from offending? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think it's the same way as in any other conversation. I'll give you an example. My wife and I we were at Ponce City Market over the weekend. She flew back in town from work, and we were already kind of in that area. I went to pick her up at the airport, and
you locked your car doors, right?
We Well, if you've ever been to Ponce City Market, it's nice, and there's parking deck. But anyway, we were in this store that immediately we had never seen before, and so we went right to it, and it was very clearly clothing from Africa. And I spent a lot of time in Africa, and I've been in multiple different countries across Africa. I've been going to Africa doing work for 20 years almost. And so immediately I saw it. And there were baskets, there were dresses, there were all kinds of things. And many of the things that even Amy will have me bring back, with me when I come back. Walked in, and the woman came up who worked there and indicated that she was from, I think, Liberia. Well, there was a display there that said that it was made by hand by folks living in Ghana. And so my wife, Amy, says, "Oh, my husband's been to Ghana. He was there working with this group to rescue children who had been bought and sold into slavery." And I just sort of nodded, and the woman immediately attacked. I mean, she just got really upset and began to argue with Amy and said, "You know what? There's child slavery everywhere, and Atlanta ranks number one for sex trafficking, and every city in America, every city in the world has it. Every city has slavery. Just aggressive, hostile, rude, And honestly, it was like the scene of a TV show. I mean, Amy and I kind of looked at each other. I mean, Amy was just striking up conversation.
Is this for real?
Yeah. And she was just striking up conversation like, "Oh, my husband's been there. He's, working." And so for a moment, I'm like, okay, was there a misunderstanding of what's happened? I mean, the lady kind of came, and she was like smiling sarcastically, like aggressive.
Yeah.
And
she was waiting on that moment.
She was. And so Amy and I kind of looked at each other, and I said to the woman, "There's a lake in Ghana named Volta where slave masters purchased children. I mean, it's a nationally known phenomenon that happens there, and there's ministries that go and try to help bring the children back without violence." Well, she started in on me, doing the same thing.
Did you not read this verse? He did not open his mouth.
It was weird. And so I just said to her, I just smiled.
Got you in trouble, man.
I said, "Well, I said, listen, we like the store." And I just smiled and said, "Please have a nice rest of the weekend." And we did. We were just like, "Have a nice day." And we just walked out. I mean, I was like, "This is great." I mean, we're just starting up conversation. And I don't think she'd ever been to Ghana. I mean, she kept talking about Liberia, but otherwise she seemed pleasant. So what's my point? Just because people start to argue and attack doesn't mean that you need to say anything. Like I could have gone into a response of the difference between something happening somewhere versus something happening on a grand scale out in public in broad daylight, right?
Yeah.
And so should a Ben Shapiro type suddenly decide in a podcast to just start criticizing Christianity? Okay. Right? I mean, Jesus was being criticized.
Sure.
And he was quiet. So I do think there is a lot of wisdom in just being quiet, you know?
Well, what Jesus taught, Sermon on the Mount, just you're to turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that over and over we see Jesus teaching that. And yet, okay, if we're supposed to be quiet, how can we, on a very practical level, how can we evangelize and be a witness for Christ to those around us?
Yeah. I went to Bible college at a school that's an apologetics school. Great school, great degree. I had incredible professors, and you hear a lot from the New Testament where it says, you have to always be ready to give a defense for the hope that you have, for the faith that is in you. And that's the word apologetics.
Yep.
It's the word apologia, which means to give a defense. Someone making a statement does not always require me to defend. But if someone were to say to me, how could you possibly believe in this murdered God, Son of God? So I guess there's three gods, Brian. Is that what you're saying? This is also silly. He was just a man trying to have a coup against the government. He got put down like he deserved. If someone were to question me like that, oh, okay, I'll tell you how I believe and then give a defense.
Yeah.
But just to hear somebody giving a criticism or an attack doesn't always warrant a response, because then
sometimes you can just roll your eyes.
You just kind of move on. This happens sometimes even in counseling situations, right?
Sure.
When I'll sit down with somebody or a group or a couple, and they'll say, "Here's the problem. What do you think the solution is?" And I'll go, "Well," and give an answer. And then sometimes the answer riles them up even more. The person that's in the office with me. And so then I'll just become quiet at that point. I don't start arguing and debating and fighting. You see that. That's one of the points I've made about Christ before too. Even Jesus did not answer every question that was brought to him.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times when someone asked him a question, he'd go, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll answer your question if you answer mine." And they wouldn't answer his. He's like, "Okay, then I'm not going to answer yours."
Yeah, you answered a question with a question.
Yeah. Because sometimes you understand. I think
I try that with my kids.
It happens a lot in family dynamics for sure. But a lot of times it's when ego and pride gets involved. And with Jesus, he understood sometimes the questions being asked weren't really a question. It was a statement in the form of a question.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing.
Like Jeopardy.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
The answer is?
I don't watch that. I heard that one girl got fired though.
A Daily Double. What?
No, she's like a host.
Oh, she got fired?
She was there was like two hosts.
You're way more up on the news than I am.
Man, that's what Charles Spurgeon said, keep your Bible in one hand and the Sunday paper in the other.
I love that you just quoted Charles Spurgeon in regards to cultural issues of the day.
The great Charles Spurgeon.
He was a good one, He's a man's man.
100%.
A great theologian, great preacher.
I once stood at his pulpit.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
in
cool.
Dallas.
That's got to be real.
It's at First Dallas. In fact, I didn't know it. I was up there, and I'm like, "Oh, this is a cool pulpit. It looks old." And I'm like touching it, kind of looking around.
Was it in their old sanctuary?
Yeah.
I led worship over there a couple times.
It's amazing. I'm like, wait a minute. This was Charles Spurgeon's pulpit, and the guy who was touring us was like, "Yeah."
Because W.A. Criswell got it.
Apparently. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wild. All right, here's another weird Baptist trivia. W.A. Criswell is directly related to Rick Warren.
Oh, that's interesting. How directly? What do you mean directly?
Rick Warren, I'm going to butcher this. Google it. It's there. Somehow Rick Warren's grandmother is related to W.A. Criswell, or was. I guess they're both dead now.
How about that?
So you have two very polar.
Well, it's like all of us are related to Noah, right? So
that's true.
I mean,
that's true.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interesting conversations to have when we get to heaven.
Yes, we do.
I
Looking
think.
forward to that. Where were we, man?
Well, I'm looking at verse 8. By oppression and judgment he was taken away, and as for his generation who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living for the transgression of my people, to whom the stroke was due.
Yeah, that's a mouthful of a sentence.
It is.
And it's difficult to read it the way it is meant to be read.
Yeah.
Because I think in our culture, in our language, we want to say, as for his generation who considered that he was cut off, like the generation was considering that he was cut off. But it's a question. As for his generation, pause, who considered that he was cut off from the land of the living for the transgression of my people to whom the stroke was due? So he was asking the question, for the people who were alive when he was being crucified, which of them considered that this was him standing in for what they deserved? And that was the point I was really trying to get across yesterday in the message. The answer was really none of them. And you got a few, the thief on the cross and some of his devoted followers. But I mean, look, even the majority of, almost all of his apostles scattered.
Yeah. When you made the point yesterday, I mean, salvation has always been about the shedding of blood for the forgiveness of sin. And that's, I love that you kind of broke that down. I think the way our Bibles read kind of changes that too, the way the lines are written.
Yeah. It's written poetically.
Yeah, but it's a question. Like it's genuinely a question. Who standing at the foot of the cross would you have considered? Not a chance.
No, I mean the Romans, the people. I mean the very Jews he came from and he came to, that he came to deliver, the Jew first and then the Greek, were the ones yelling, "Crucify him, crucify him." Yeah. In fact, and we'll get into this once we get to the Passion narrative, but you talk about the attention that's been given in the Gospels of his last week.
Yep.
Well, Mark, almost half the book of Mark is dedicated to the last week of his life.
Right.
So Mark is going to go into an uncharacteristic amount of detail. Yeah, we're going to get back into that. I'm looking forward to that.
Is that going to line up with Easter? Will you make it line up with Easter?
It'll be hard to fly through it to get there. When's Easter this year coming up,
I think it's... when's the Masters? That's what I know.
We don't know Easter, but hey.
Let's be honest. It's the last week of March.
Yeah, so I don't know. I have to look at it. I haven't finished it up yet. There's a lot of maneuvering.
Easter would be the first week of April because Masters Sunday is
typically. Yeah, I love how you're first foundationally, let's get Masters squared away.
Some people have a Christian calendar they go by. I have a a calendar.
I understand.
When's Masters Sunday? When's the World Series?
Super Bowl.
When's the Super Bowl? That's usually the first week of February. And I really don't care about the NBA at all. Yeah. So let's just leave that. Like I'd rather watch NASCAR.
Yeah, now you're talking. Yeah.
Which tells you how much I don't like the NBA.
500, the Daytona 500.
It's an interesting one. It's February. Yeah, so there's a lot of good stuff that happens in February. I think I'm to the point now to where I'm Christmased out. And I mean, admittedly, I think because I've been listening to Christmas music for so long, we've worked on Christmas music for so long for the Christmas shows.
Yeah.
I'm just like, ugh.
So just to point out something to our listening audience,
watching audience,
you have now criticized Chick-fil-A in favor of Popeyes. That happened.
Okay, no.
You criticized Waffle House's coffee mug.
Can I offer an apologetic response for this?
Now you're really marginalizing people by saying you're done with Christmas music. You have created a whole swath of enemies.
In each of those circumstances, I have prefaced it with my own opinion.
You tried to hedge.
I'm not lumping anybody else into my category.
Yeah.
And here's why. Here's my apologetic defense.
Response? Okay, let's hear this. Yeah.
In regards to Chick-fil-A and Popeyes, my only comment was that the chicken sandwich is better.
Oh, I can't believe you just repeated it.
It is.
Oh, my goodness.
It is. And those who have experienced the Popeyes chicken sandwich would agree with that. Now, does a better chicken sandwich negate the poor customer service or the long wait times or the rest of the menu not being up to par? No.
Is the rest of the menu not very good?
I don't think so. That's my opinion. That's why I go to Chick-fil-A. Because you get treated like you're
like a human.
You matter. Yeah. I mean, it's just there's a lesson in human decency every time I go to Chick-fil-A, which I love that. As far as Waffle House is concerned, I meant what I said about those coffee mugs. They don't keep your coffee hot.
But although someone...
But that was remedied by my friend Richard.
Who brought me. And
that cup keeps them hot coffee.
Richard knows
so
what's
I'm very thankful.
He knows what he's doing.
So I pretty much exclusively drink out of that I'm traveling.
I'm a big Richard fan.
He's a good dude.
He's been with me to Israel, Greece, Turkey, Egypt. Yeah, he's been with me. He and his wife.
He's been with you to Kenya.
They're awful. Awesome. Golly. You said Kenya and it threw me off. Wow. Richard and Glenda
was that a Freudian slip?
I know. What were you saying about Kenya?
I asked if he'd been there with you.
No, he's not been with me to Kenya. Although he's welcome to go. But listen, when you go with me to Kenya, it's not the same as going with me to Israel, Greece, Turkey, and
the accommodations aren't quite as fast.
We're not staying in 5 stars. Let me just tell you.
Yeah, if I'm picking a trip to go on,
I
think I'm going to choose something.
It's fun though, but I mean, we got to be.
But you have a real heart for it.
I've been going to Kenya for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know that I share that same heart.
I can make it fun when someone says to me, "Hey, I'll go with you to Kenya." I'm always like, "Let's talk about this."
Let's have a pastoral counseling session.
Yeah, we can go. Come on with me. We've got 2 hostels that we've built over the years. Both are fine. Mm-hmm. You don't get your own room. There are some examples in which we could get a hotel.
Is it a hostel situation over there? Get it?
I do. No one's ever made that joke before.
I'm full of them today.
Full of something.
Golly.
Yeah. Oh, man. Let's see. I do think it's interesting how you've alienated yourself from Chick-fil-A, Waffle House, and now Christmas music people.
Alienated or set myself up?
I don't know.
I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah. For the record, I'm a big fan of Chick-fil-A and Waffle House, if anyone's listening. Although, listen, last week I had a meeting at Waffle House. I was
What kind of meeting
hungry.
you having at Waffle House?
The best kind, right?
You've never asked for a meeting with me at Waffle House.
We'll do that. You want? Man, I was so hungry. I ordered almost everything on the menu. I got a waffle with peanut butter on it, scrambled eggs.
Because you don't do syrup.
I don't do syrup. I got sausage, and then I had an additional side of bacon. I had hash browns, I had ham, and then I had a side of sausage gravy I just poured over the whole entire thing. It was amazing. I was in so much pain.
I bet.
For like the rest of the day.
You ate half a pig.
I reached out to Richard, and I was like, Richard, I pretty much ate everything on the menu. He was like, you need to go lay down.
We got to talk.
Go take a nap.
The only thing you were missing was a patty melt.
I know, man. It was so good.
Jeez, that's a lot of food.
I ate every bit of it, too.
And you pour gravy over it?
Throw down. Yeah. Ugh. That gravy's good. Can we get back to Isaac?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So by
I didn't eat lunch. Yeah. I'm hungry.
What's a question you were going to throw out about Isaiah verse 8?
I don't remember about verse 8. I think you answered it. Just trying to explain the whole passage because it didn't sit well, to read it, how it's written.
It's a clunky.
Wrapping up with verse 9. This is, listen to the sermon. This is probably, for me, the biggest part that stood out, but also like just kind of the paradox that's presented in, he was assigned to a grave with wicked men, yet he was a rich man in his death because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. Hearkening back to him not opening his mouth, lived a perfect sinless life, which was a complete prophecy of the way Jesus would live.
Yeah.
And yet you have this paradox here of his grave was assigned with wicked men, sinful men, and yet he lived as a rich man.
Yeah. There's an interesting contrast.
A rich man in his death.
He's putting together. It's almost like he's saying, on one hand are the wicked, on the other hand are the rich. And the reason this is such an interesting contrast that he puts out there poetically, Isaiah here, is because when you read the Old Testament, most often you come across what seems like the wicked are the rich. The rich are wicked.
Sure.
And like I've even pointed out, Jesus himself even saying, it's very hard for a rich man to go to heaven, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. So while there are verses where you could point to and say, okay, if you have plenty, if you have abundance, it's because God has blessed you. Those who are rich have abundance, then I guess the rich are blessed of God. You could point to something and make a connection. But that's not really the point of what's being said in those particular passages. So, he was assigned a grave with the wicked. He was crucified between 2 wicked, a thief on the right, a thief on the left. At least one of, and Barabbas was at one point in that group. He was a murderer, but he got released instead of Jesus. So we know that
how much guilt did that guy feel?
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, and then for him to be, it says, with a rich man in his death. Had a guy come up to me yesterday and say, he said, I was thinking about that verse when you were teaching it. He said, yes, he was placed in the tomb of Lazarus, or I'm sorry, of
Joseph
of Arimathea, who was wealthy. He said also he was with Joseph of Arimathea. So he was buried among those, people who would have been wealthy. But he also was, there's the wealthy man, Joseph of Arimathea, also had the body of Jesus.
Physically carried him.
Yeah, and I was like,
proximity.
For sure.
Well, that was the connection I made. And I think probably several other folks trying to draw lines to Jesus' life probably did the same thing. I'm curious to know if that was a direct prophecy for how he would be buried and the treatment he would get in his burial. I mean, he was anointed in fine fragrances, wrapped in fine linen, placed in a tomb. Tomb was sealed with a stone. They put soldiers. I mean, he got the burial of a dignitary. And
yeah,
here's Isaiah
I
saying,
definitely think it's definitely a prophecy for sure. I mean, because the way it's written,
well, he's a prophet.
In
Isaiah.
the past tense, this is what happened, but he's saying it in the future. We've already covered all that, but so yes, it's a prophecy, and the way that I even answered the guy who came up to me yesterday is, a lot of the prophecies in the Old Testament have more than a single fulfillment. Let me explain. So you take King David. He was told that his descendant would sit on the throne, and he did. Solomon, and Jesus did. So you have a right now and a future fulfillment.
So what you're saying is not every prophecy is directly correlated to Jesus or something that happened in Jesus' life. It could be a now and later thing.
You mean like in general or in Isaiah 53?
Well, just generally.
Yeah, I mean,
I think this is pretty clear. But
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that there are some prophecies that are not about Jesus because ultimately they find their fulfillment in Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But yes, in the sense that like the son of David, Solomon, became, so that prophecy was about Solomon in that sense, but it was also about Jesus later. So you do have a now and much later fulfillment for many of the prophecies throughout the Bible. So again, another way in which the Bible just has so many layers, that man, the deeper you dig, the deeper it goes.
Well, I think that's why you hear of folks who have been following Jesus for a long time, who have, and I'm not talking about preachers or pastors or theologians, but folks who live normal lives and yet have devoted themselves to reading Scripture over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and yet you repeatedly come back and find something new, something fresh, something different, something. There are several books that I've read multiple times. And at some point, third or fourth time you read through it, you're like, all right, I think
it happens in every context.
I've got everything.
Movies are that way. Yeah. There are movies that I love to watch.
Yeah.
And still, I bet I've seen some of these movies 20 times. And sometimes I'll even put it on in the background just to have something on.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a big fan of complete silence.
What's your favorite movie?
I don't know that I have a favorite, but a lot of my
favorites.
If
you had to narrow it down.
I like 13 Hours. Have you ever seen that?
Oh.
It's a phenomenal movie. That's a great one.
What's it about?
It's about what happened the 13 Hours of Benghazi.
Oh, okay.
Oh, my goodness. It's an exceptional guy movie.
So an aggressive movie. Shocking.
I like Braveheart, Gladiator. A lot of the movies I like tend to be like that, as a family.
You have some anger issues we need to work through?
I just enjoy, and there's truth to it based on a true story type of thing.
I'm with you. I like movies that are connected to real life somehow.
I do. I really do.
Rudy. Rudy's probably my favorite movie.
Oh, great flick. They call them docudramas or something like that. I like those kinds of movies. I don't ever like wasting time. So
I've never really gotten into Star Wars or anything like that.
So as a family, we have some series that we will watch. My son likes Star Wars, so we've exhausted that.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, but you got to watch it. But like we had, as a family, some people are going to judge, but we have a very real and personal reason, maybe for a future conversation, that we sat down one day and years ago watched the Harry Potter series, and there's like 6 or 7 of them.
So you're into witchcraft?
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, sorcery. I'm going to get all the emails now. But we had a reason.
Brian.Boyles
it happened.
at churchonmain.net.
I know, yeah. But you could watch that thing 100 times and still see something different. Well, the Bible's the same way. You read it, and there's still something different. And it's one of the things I have so much fun in, and especially when then you begin to bring out the languages, and you start to go, oh gosh, this Greek word means this, or this Hebrew cognate means that, and I mean it opens up so many more things. And
your MDiv was in languages, wasn't it? Yeah, so that fascinates you.
There's there it is, right there, a famous quote from Martin Luther. Languages are the scabbard that contain the sword of the Spirit, the casket which contains the priceless jewels of antique thought, They are the vessel that holds the wine, and as the gospel says, they are the baskets in which the loaves and fishes are kept to read the multitude. That was Martin Luther. John Piper.
You went through a lot of effort to read
I did. There's
that.
like a huge glare. I can't hardly see it. So it's like, I don't
It was more fun watching you try and move your head around to read
I
it.
know. I felt like I was dodging bullets over
Yeah.
here. So anyway.
John Piper.
Oh, yeah. Piper once wrote an article about a banker 100 and some years ago who was just a Christian. He wasn't a pastor,
Yeah.
wasn't a theologian, wasn't anything like that. He was a banker. But yet he so wanted to have a better grasp of God's word that he on his own learned Greek and Hebrew so that he could better understand what God's word says. And his name was Bitzer. Bitzer was a banker is the name of the article. Bitzer was a banker. And it's pretty convicting, especially if you're in ministry of like, okay, I need to be more serious about the word.
There's a guy I know in Houston, Texas. His name's Mark Lanier. Been able to interact with him several times. He is a wadzillionaire. He's a trial attorney, and he won several big settlements with like class action stuff against Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, wow.
You know, people who were inflicted harm based on something. Anyway, he has devoted his life to advancing the gospel, but he has devoted his personal life to understanding the Bible. And so he's got the Lanier Theological Institute that he started.
Is there a big library that he has?
It's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
no, I've heard of this. I've been
It's
invited
gorgeous.
to go see it.
Yeah. So I was there last March, I think it was. And, you know, I was helping lead a conference for some worship pastors, and we held it there. And it was stunning. It's built in the crucifix model of like a Turkish synagogue or chapel or whatever. But the library itself, so you mentioned Harry Potter earlier. At Oxford, the dining room in Harry Potter, he's got a replica of that in the library.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, and so where he hosts theological students, residents from all over the country, all these seminaries will come there to do like a semester of study.
That's awesome.
And practicum work in local churches. Anyway, he's a great dude.
Listen, that is an area, in all honesty, what you're bringing up is something that I've got an ongoing conversation with a couple here in the church, soon to be revealed, who are interested in helping me engage business leaders, like the guy you're referring to truly see what they have and what they do with a kingdom purpose.
Absolutely.
Aside from just
Not
making
just
money.
resources.
Yeah.
It's influence.
Well, and knowledge, leadership. I mean, I don't know anybody very successful in business that's not a good leader. They understand leadership decisions and all that. And so we're working on a way to engage. I mean, here at our church, we have folks that are business leaders, business owners, even retired, who have an incredibly gifted business mind, leadership mind. And I want to see us as a church be engaged with people in our community and abroad who want to use the ability God has given them. I'm not even talking about financial.
Sure.
To help advance God's kingdom instead of the retreat it seems like American Christians have been in.
Well, that's what, you know, this guy Mark Lanier, and just conversations I've had with him, his big argument is less about, you know, him dumping money into something. And he's very philanthropic with and very benevolent and generous with his resources. But he cares more about the spiritual maturity and the heart behind the people he gets to encounter that work for him, work with him, that he encounters on a day-to-day basis. I mean, this guy has been in the Oval Office. He's been, you know, on Skid Row, right? And it's just, you get the same person each place, and he has the same heart for the same people. So it's a beautiful thing to see. And I think if people could realize, especially business leaders, and this is just my observation, you kind of get tunnel vision where you're so focused, so hyper-focused on what you're doing and your world, and we're all guilty of that. That you lose the perspective of, okay, how can I use my influence to impact others? How can I use my resources to impact others? Whatever it is, and it doesn't matter if you have a wadzillion dollars. I mean, you know, we're at the end of year for the church, and end of year giving is a big thing. You know, and the question is less about how much you can give, it's about how you can impact. What is the greatest impact you can have? And I believe with my whole heart, it's through the local church. You know, so if you're out there and you're looking at year in giving, like, man, I'd encourage you to pray about and see what the Lord would have you give. And maybe your biggest Christmas gift this year goes to Jesus instead of
Yeah, no,
yourself.
I mean, I talk about this every year. I talked about this a few Sundays ago, how with the things that we're working on here behind the scenes to roll out in 2024, in the countries we're engaging, the pastors we're engaging, the missionaries we're engaging with, and pastors' conferences that I'm doing and trying to get in more and being invited to more, trying to make it where I can go to more. And we're wanting to start a residency program here for those who want to be church planters and really engage these people in ministry here so that they can be launched from here and go plant churches. And we're going to work together with our missions agency here. I mean, this is a great place to invest so that we can continue to make an impact kingdom-wide. So that's a goal that we've got. But instead, you see folks a lot of times, man, they give to political groups. They give to hospitals and universities.
Please tell me how much good that does.
I know.
The political part, the hospitals I get. But
yeah, of course.
Anyway. Well, I've got no trivia today.
Wow. You going to talk about the candle?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the reminder. So I brought a candle, if you can see this eternal flame going. Little JFK reference.
Can they see it?
I don't know. Oh,
No,
don't pour my wax out.
No, we don't want to lose the wax.
Our candlelight Christmas Eve services are coming up, 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock on Sunday. Cannot believe it's here. So we're going to have candlelight at both services. Our 10 o'clock services, I'd say a little more laid back. If kids want to come in PJs, I think that's totally cool.
Define that. I've learned this the hard way.
Oh, come in PJs?
Yeah, let's define what kids is, and let's define what pajamas are allowed.
Under the age of 6, and pajamas that are, covering. Please wear shoes.
Brush your teeth.
Yeah, fix your hair.
We did this one time years and years and years ago, second church I served at, and man, I was like, I will never make a blanket mistake. Yeah, that backfired big time.
Treat it as if, it was Mary Poppins in pajamas. It's very...
So the 10 o'clock service, right? Yep. Sunday morning, this coming Sunday, the 24th, Christmas Eve, will be roughly how long?
Right at 52 minutes.
And then there's a message.
There is.
And there's
a children's message in that moment that will tie in with our Advent candle lighting, because we'll light the candle of love this week, plus the Christ candle. So you get a twofer.
And music.
But
it differs
lots
from
of Christmas
the
carols.
5 o'clock service. How?
The 5 o'clock is your traditional evening Christmas Eve service. So you'll see people probably a little more dressed up. You have candlelight at both. You have Christmas carols at both. There's no children's moment in the PM service, and the 5 o'clock is about 42 minutes.
Okay.
So
either way, I'm going to both.
Get you out of there early so you can go to Waffle House.
That happens every year.
Christmas Eve at Waffle House.
Tradition we have here.
Yeah.
Everybody can meet us at Waffle House on 78 on 78. And
make sure you tip well if you go.
Tip your waitress.
Back
to what we were. So to summarize today's podcast. Big fan of Richard and Glenda, even though you insulted Waffle House. I never did.
I insulted their mugs. Waffle House generally.
Man, you should be back. I'm giving you opportunities to backtrack.
I have no regrets. Not even one letter.
Not even one.
Not even one letter.
All right, good. We all love Richard and Glenda. And
we love Waffle House.
And we love Gene.
And Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A.
And Popeyes.
And I don't even, maybe once in my life I've gone to Popeyes.
I'm going to get you that chicken sandwich.
Okay.
I tried to take Gene there, but he said he wouldn't be called dead.
No, I could see Gene being like that.
I told him he could go and hand out Chick-fil-A coupons.
He's nothing if not loyal.
That's fair. Very fair. All right. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We look forward to seeing you all Sunday, Christmas Eve.
Cool.
10 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Have a great week.
See you then.